The number one thing that scares new wholesalers the most is typically contracts. Reading through all these different templates online that you don't understand can be absolutely terrifying. And not understanding these contracts could mean being potentially stuck buying a property you never had the intentions of actually purchasing. So today I'm going to break down exactly how wholesaling contracts work and how we use ours to list our properties on the MLS. And at the end of this video, I'm going to share with you the exact templates we use in our very own business. We always tell sellers when we're working with them and they're reviewing the contracts that it's written in third grade English to make sure that anybody can understand it. So here is what our standard purchase contract for real estate looks like. I'm going to go through this quickly for everybody. So if you have any questions about it, feel free to drop them in the comments. The purchase contract for real estate, the first thing we want to look at is this first line right here. This is going to be where we will put the seller's information. So whoever you're talking to about selling the property, that's where their name's going to go. The second line is going to be where you put your name or your company's name as the buyer. Now you're going to see this little verbiage here and or assigns. This is the first part that allows us to make this contract assignable. Next part you want to make sure you absolutely get correct is the address of the property. This is the legal address of the property that will be at title and escrow. You want to make sure that's correct. I would always double check that before sending out a contract for signature. Next part of the contract is just explaining that this is an as-is sale, meaning that the sellers of the property are not required to do any work to upkeep the property after the sale or do any repairs beforehand, fixing any leaks, roofs, windows that might need replaced, anything of the sorts. It is as is. As the property stands is how the property will sell. Now the next part is going to be the purchase price. Underneath that, you're going to have your earnest money deposit. It's typical within our company to typically do $500 in security deposit. The cash at close of escrow, this is going to be the purchase price minus the earnest money deposit. So the first section here of closing costs just states that the buyer will be paying all the closing costs, which is very traditional in a wholesale transaction. 2 just says liens, unpaid utility bills, encumbrances, and mortgages will be paid in full by the seller. Number 3 goes over taxes and how that is divvied up. 4 is close of escrow. So buyer and seller agree to close of escrow to be blank from the property listing date. Now, since utilizing novations and selling our properties on the MLS is our main strategy in our personal business, we've changed the verbiage to not make the contract start the day it is signed, but it's actually the day the property gets listed on the multiple listing services, which is a huge game changer in allowing us extra time to make sure that these properties get sold for the sellers. Number 5 just states that the earnest money deposit will be held by a title company or an attorney. Number 6 is our due diligence period. This is the term that allows us to actually back out of the contract if at any point we decide we do not want to purchase it. So the due diligence period in our contracts follow the close of escrow timeline. So you can back out up to the day of closing without having repercussions or losing out on your earnest money. Now, we always tell people, if you know ahead of time that it's not a good deal or you're not gonna be able to get the property sold, don't keep people waiting, let them know, have those tough conversations up front. Sometimes things don't always work out, but you never wanna keep people stringing along. But if for some reason you forget, the timeline gets pushed, things happen that aren't expected, you do have that protection and legally can back out up to the day of closing on the property without repercussions. Number 7 goes over buyer continue access to the property. This just states that the buyer will receive reasonable access to the property and our representatives, inspectors, partners, realtors, assignees, property managers, and anybody else we authorize to do walkthroughs or inspections on the property. This just makes sure if the seller doesn't want to let us into the property, we're always allowed in with reasonable notice. Number 8 just states that the property is going to be delivered vacant and no one will be living in the home after the close of escrow. Number 9 just states that everybody involved is getting all of the documents that would be provided to title and everybody gets a copy of their own. Number 10 just states if there's any delays in title and the title needs work to clear, this is an automatic extension that gives us 60 calendar days to work on that to get the property cleared with title to be able to close on the home. Number 11 just states that if the title is not insurable on the home, that the buyer will receive their full earnest money deposit back. Number 12 is very simple, just states that the seller has the full right, power, and authority to sell the home, as well as will keep the property in the same condition upon it was in when the offer was made until the close of escrow. Number 13 just states that the buyer and or its members are not acting as real estate agents in this transaction, but only as a principal buyer. Number 14 is default by seller. If the seller shall breach any of the terms or provisions in this contract prior to close of escrow, buyer may proceed against seller seller for any claims or remedy the buyer may have in law or equity, which includes but is not limited to specific performance or damages. Now, this clause, hopefully you don't have to use. However, if a seller goes behind your back, if they ghost you and stop talking to you the day of closing, whatever it may be, this gives you the ability to pursue them for the damages that you may have lost in this transaction. Number 15 just states that if we, the buyers, breach the contract, that the seller is able to receive the earnest money deposit that we put up in the beginning of the contract. Now, number 16 is other agreements. There's a couple things in here, so I'm gonna read the whole thing for you first and we'll go over it. Buyer agrees to purchase the property in as-is condition. Buyer to pay all closing costs. This contract allows the buyer reserves the right to novate this agreement with a replacement agreement with a third-party purchaser. And in either such event, seller shall cooperate fully at buyer's request to transfer title to the property directly to the third-party purchaser, provided, however, that the buyer shall be responsible for all additional transfer tax payable by seller as a result of this assignment or novation, and to record a memorandum of agreement with the appropriate county department to show an agreement for sale is executed. Now, what this is saying is the seller is required to cooperate with us when we novate this property. Now, again, like I've talked about in other videos, a traditional wholesale fee is when you're assigning your rights in a contract to an investor. You are selling them your contract. When you're novating, you are replacing your contract with the new buyer and getting the fee in between from what you have it locked up at and what the new buyer is paying for it. Number 17 just states about the memorandum of contract. This allows you to record with the county clerk's office your purchase agreement, protecting you if the seller tries to sell the home to anybody else. Title will be clouded and they will not be able to proceed with that transaction. Number 18 is very simple, just says no oral changes or representations, just stating that if it's not written and signed on, nothing can change in the agreement. Of course, at the bottom, you have your buyer signature as well as your signature here, along with the initials on the bottom of each page. And that is a complete walkthrough of the purchase contract that we use in our business every day. So one thing that's great about all of our contracts is all of them are legally binding, meaning once the seller and the buyer have agreed and put their name on the dotted line, this is something that is enforceable to ensure that the transaction goes through. One of the other major things in our process is utilizing title companies. Title companies essentially research the history of the property to ensure the home can be sold and the person selling it has legal rights to actually sell the property. Having an insurable title is something that every single home needs if they're going to be using conventional FHA or VA financing, and it is definitely something that it needs to anybody I would ever recommend purchasing a property. Doing so without opens yourself up to a massive potential for risk. All right, so the next step after you've gotten the property under contract, you've found a buyer for it on the MLS utilizing our strategies. What is the next thing you need to do? The next thing you need to do is get a novation and indemnification agreement signed. This is the piece of paper that allows you to replace your purchase contract with the new buyers and collect the fee in the middle. The first thing you're going to want to do right here is put the date of the day you're signing this document. The second thing you want to do is make sure you're placing the seller's legal name or the name that holds title to the property in this first section here. The next thing you'd like to do is change the buyer's name in these parentheses here to reflect the name you are going to be purchasing under. Whether you're utilizing your personal name or a company name, it will go in those parentheses and you can keep it there for every time you utilize this template. The next thing you're going to do is you are going to place the date here of your original purchase contract with the seller that you two have already agreed to before you started this process. The next thing you're gonna do is make sure, again, you have the legal property address on this line here and put the original purchase price you had with the seller on your first contract with them right on this line here. Once you come down a little bit, what you're gonna do here is you're going to place the new buyer's name. This is telling us who we are swapping the contracts out for. The only thing left to do on this is quite simple. You're gonna scroll down to number 5 where it says net proceeds payable to seller. The number you're gonna put here is the original amount that you offered to pay to the seller on your first contract with them. Once you're done with that, all you'll need to do is put your signature on the bottom, as well as have the seller electronically sign this so you can send it off to title and escrow, and be on your way to closing the deal. These contracts are not as complicated as most people make them out to be. I've used these exact templates to close countless of deals over the last few years. You can find both of these contracts for free using the link in the description. But just remember, this is not legal advice, and we always recommend to have an attorney review your documents before you start to use them. And they've served us very well so far. So go ahead, click the link, grab those down below, and we'll see you in the next video.